Oh, really, Rhonda? Well, hope you're going to hang out. That could fall under because he was interested in him. What's up, Kimmy? Olivia, Rhonda, Teresa, Miss Thang, and Lynn. Charlie. What's going on, guys? Yeah, well, we're going to take a real close look. Good to see you, Teresa. What's up, D? Hey, Chopper. Okay. Yeah, we're going to take a good look today. I don't know if you would call it a deep dive. Hello, Beach Fairy. Bird Blue. What's up, Ruckus? Vanessa. Baby Bear in the place. Jules. How you doing, Jules? Hey, Mandy. Okay, so we got another person leaving a 1 in the comments. Now, the reason they're doing that, this is the first time they've heard of the case. Or should I say cases? 49 confirmed, anyway. Denise, what's up? Welcome. Hope everybody makes you feel welcome. Shout out to Denise, first time. Yeah, Charlie, I like to call this the waiting game. Kimmy says, I followed this case back in the day. The last wife has a book out. She's something else. Yeah, I think I have an interview of hers that we're going to play at some point. Yeah, she's in the mix. Oh, that's awful. Yikes. Well, I hope you feel better. Okay. Yeah, it's strange because Gary Ridgway was one of the most prolific serial killers in all history. At one point, I think he was. Oops, shout out to Georgia. Georgia's on my mind. Bird says, I've followed this one for years, have read several books on him. What's up, goat? Everybody just walking in. What's up, Bossy? Hey, Purdue. Good to see you, as always. Hey, Sensei. Good to see you. Kelly. Ruckus says the way he casually talks about his murders reminds me of the BTK. Well, what's strange is I was thinking about the Delphi suspect, Richard Allen, and I was thinking, how the hell can somebody who's been married and has kids of their own go out and commit such a brutal act? And it got me thinking about Gary Ridgway, because he was married 3 times and he has a son, and he actually would use his children to kind of camouflage him as a normal person. So I guess I guess a good question to ask is, could you recognize a psychopath if he was sitting right next to you? Teresa says took his son with him. Ugh. Yeah, on one occasion he did. He parked his truck, left his son in the vehicle, and then went and committed a murder. Baby Bear says no, but I know an asshole. I have asshole radar. Looks like we got Grunge Truck, Lynn. Who else is walking in? All right, good to see you guys. We'll probably give it another minute or two. Plus, I need some water. Yikes, that sounds awful. Yeah, so that brings back the question. Would you know it if a psychopath was sitting right there with you? If you were working with a psychopath, if you were married to a psychopath? Yeah, very cold-blooded, Olivia. Like, how does that happen? People say trauma at an early age. Well, let's take a look at something here. I really don't have a rhyme and reason for today, so hopefully all the information will just come out the way it's not too confusing for you guys. But here, let me share my screen. Now, I believe these are his grandparents. They look normal. I think grandparents with his father or his grandfather, or that might have been his great grandparents. I'm not sure. His parents. I mean, they look normal to me. His first wife. Second wife. Does he look like a psychopath? And this is the third wife, and I think we have an interview with her somewhere lined up in today's stream. I mean, look at that smile. Psychopaths don't smile like that, right? Okay, so I'm reading pretty much from 3 different articles. All the links are in the description for mostly everything. But if you want a more detailed, in-depth, I guess, source of information, I would check out any one of those links. Hiding in plain sight. Wow, 16 murderers. It's like playing the lottery out here. Will I be a serial killer's victim today? I don't know. What's the latest MO? Play the odds tonight at 6. All right, so let's get into a little bit of his background. So Gary Leon Ridgway was born on February 18th, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. From 1982 to 1998, Gary Ridgway terrorized Washington state as the Green River Killer. He murdered at least 49 women, but the real number could be as high as 71. I've even heard as high as 90, actually. If true, this would make him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history and one of the most brutal. From bragging about his choking ability to explaining the cold-blooded efficiency of performing necrophilia on a victim's corpse instead of finding a new victim to rape and kill. Ridgway's story was nothing short of chilling. I always wondered what it'd be like to kill someone. This is what 16-year-old Gary Ridgway reportedly said when walking away from his first victim, a 6-year-old who he stabbed in the woods. But Ridgway had only hit his target's liver. The kindergartner survived his encounter with Ridgway, who would go on to become one of America's most prolific serial killers. The Green River Killer, named for where the bodies of his first victims were found in Washington state, strangled mostly sex workers along highways. After his arrest, he told police he was doing them a favor, saying, "You guys can't control them, but I can." He also admitted to targeting sex workers because he thought he could get away with it. They wouldn't be missed, he said in a recorded confession. I think I have that confession here. Well, part of it.
Killing prostitutes here, you guys can't control them, but I can.
Okay.
And
For the first time, we hear the twisted reasoning of the Green River Killer. He believed he was solving the prostitute problem.
and I choked her to death. Then I took my socks off and got them in a knot and tied them around her neck and tied them as tight as I could. I'm quite sure I put.
In hundreds of hours of interviews with police over 7 months, Gary Ridgway laid out his grisly confession, hoping to save himself from the death penalty.
I agreed to plead guilty to the counts that I committed, not any others.
This date is June 13th, 2003. It's Ridgway's first interview with police. He tells them he's killed at least 47 women, but it could be as many as 53. He's just not sure.
That's where the guardrail, at the end of the guardrail. So you want to, on the left-hand side.
Left-hand side.
On the left-hand side.
In eerie field trips, the killer leads
Just like Ted
investigators
Bundy.
to 3 of his victims.
All right.
Okay, let's start walking.
For 20 years, police had been unable to find their remains.
Could we walk down there? That tree looked familiar.
Down here?
And there's a...
But despite what they gained, investigators tell me these trips troubled them because they knew Ridgway was reliving his crimes, getting one more thrill at their expense.
This is definitely the spot.
And it was sometimes difficult for police to listen to the killer's confession.
And so she raised her head up, and that's when I put my arm around her, my right arm, and started choking her.
Here, Ridgway describes how he killed.
Jeez. Yeah, right from his mouth. Guarantee he was reliving it as well. I was also reading some articles about geographically profiling killers. Have you guys heard about that? Where they kind of look at the areas where the bodies were found. They can kind of determine where the anchor point might be, or where the suspect may be located. I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah, he looks like your regular guy. The mustache is debatable. Yeah, I guess in the 70s and 80s, that might have been a little bit different, but I see what you're saying. Hey, Heather. Who else we got? No effects. If you live in Philly like me, you walk past that many killers per day, I'm thinking. Wow. What about serial killers? Yeah, I think he was trying to be helpful. Like, look, I'm helpful. Don't kill me. Yeah, and Ted Bundy actually helped in this case. We're going to take a look here. I do have an article. Everything's linked in the description. So if you guys get curious about anything, or just go right to the description. All these articles are right there if you want to look at them in their entirety. Here, let's throw up some images of good old Ted. Now, Ted Bundy and Gary Ridgway were like, they almost lived the same life. Like, it's really strange. So I don't know what you guys are putting in the water over there in Washington State, but man, we're talking like back to back. You had Ted Bundy and then you had Gary Ridgway, and they had like the highest body counts out of any serial killers that were out there. And they both lived a similar life. So we'll touch on that here. Yeah, it's choking ability. When he was 16, he stabbed somebody who was 6. And when he walked away, he said something like, "I always wanted to know what it felt like to kill somebody." So he thought he thought he was actually killing somebody, but the little kid survived. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, women haters, like mother issues. I'm thinking, I don't know. Need somebody to psychoanalyze these guys. Dark psychology. Yeah, it's almost like they're possessed, you know? Like the demon knocks out the other guy and just kind of takes over. Yeah, they were very similar. Ridgway, the reason that he was into necrophilia was he said it was his way of trying not to go out and get another victim. I really doubt that. Kimmy says, nope. They were douchey then too. All right, so let's read this article here. This is basically, I think, Ted Bundy trying to help out with the Ridgway case, and I think he actually did. Ted Bundy is known as one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, having admitted to killing 36 women, but possibly having as many as 100 victims during his murdering spree in the 1970s. After being given death sentences in 1979 and 1980, Bundy was on death row when murder started happening in Washington state in 1982. Investigators were stumped by the slayings around the King County as young women kept disappearing and with their bodies turning up along the Green River. The murderer on the loose became known as the Green River Killer, but officials couldn't track down his whereabouts until they were offered assistance from none other than Bundy, who gave them insight into the mentality of a serial killer. So that kind of reminded me of this. So I took some clips. And there's actually 2 clips from this movie that remind me of Ted Bundy. Let me load them both. Might as well. They're right there. Okay, so he's offering right here insight into the mentality of a serial killer. Right? Eventually, with Bundy's help, Gary Ridgway was caught and admitted to his 49th murder on February 18th, 2011, with actual estimates being closer to 80 victims. Born on November 24th, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. Bundy moved to Tacoma, Washington as a child and grew up in the area, showing a fascination with knives at the age of 3 and an obsession with spying and stealing as a teen. He graduated with a psychology degree from the University of Washington in 1972. And around 1974, women in Washington and Oregon started going missing. The word on the street was that they would be lured into a car by a man named Ted, who pretended to be injured with his arm in a sling, needing their help. Trying to help, trying to use the better part of humanity so that he can proceed to do the worst. Bundy later moved to Utah for law school, where he was caught. He eventually escaped from prison and ended up in Tallahassee, Florida, continuing to kill wherever he went. Ironically, Ridgway was born in Utah on February 18th, 1949, but also raised in Washington State near Seattle's SeaTac Airport. Before graduating high school, he joined the Navy and was sent to Vietnam. When he returned, he started painting trucks, and around 1982, runaways and prostitutes started disappearing off of State Route 99 in Washington's King County. He tended to bring them to his home, strangle them, and dispose of their bodies in the woods, which is how several ended up washing up along and nearby the Green River. So, and come to find out, I think that Silence of the Lambs, I think they did get a lot of that writing, because originally it's a book, of course. But I think they took a lot of their writing was based off of Ted Bundy. Because think about it, he did escape. In Silence of the Lambs, he does escape, and he goes on killing. He's kind of like a smart person. He's a lawyer, investigator, detective. Similar. Mother issues. Yeah, seems to be what goes on. Wow. Statistically speaking, 50 of you are out of your mind. But I think it's a lot more. That's just my personal opinion. Straight out of the courthouse window. Yeah, that dude's crazy. I don't even think he was allowed to have shoes after that. Like everywhere he went, Ted Bundy, he couldn't have shoes. All right. Now, I collected a few local media reports on him. These are pretty interesting, some interviews. We'll kind of stop and go. I think there's a couple clips from some great documentaries that are out there. Those are all linked in the descriptions too. I'm sure any of you that are familiar with this case have seen Sins of the Father. We'll also talk about this case's version of Ron Logan. His name was Melvin Foster, so I think we'll talk about that. We'll spend some time there because it's interesting. I would like to get your opinion as well. So I think we will start with this one. This is titled Youngest Victim Identified.
Youngest victim. Nearly 4 decades after her murder, King County investigators have identified the body of a 14-year-old girl, closing the books on another cold case linked to mass murder. Gary Ridgway.
Wendy was loved by many.
It is the face of a 14-year-old girl who ran away from home in Denver, Colorado in 1983 and became a victim of a serial killer 1,300 miles away in Washington State.
These remains were found in 1984. We're looking at 37 years ago.
For decades, Wendy Stevens was referred to only as Jane Doe B10. DNA technology and decades of detective work have now identified her as the youngest victim of Gary Ridgway.
They were able to do a DNA extraction Through that extraction, they do sequencing and they generate a profile.
In a state ravaged by serial killers, Gary Ridgway stands out.
I don't know that any has been as impactful as Green River.
He was convicted of killing 49 women, but confessed to 71. Many of them prostitutes in Seattle. Some of their bodies were dumped here along the Green River in South King County.
It's that somber reminder of a time that we wish had just never happened.
It took 20 years to catch Gary Ridgway and bring him to justice. He even passed a lie detector test that measures in part your heart rate.
One of the core characteristics of a psychopath.
Yep. Pure psychopath right here. Like, how do you explain that?
Is they have a low resting heart rate.
In the end, Ridgway admitted to killing Wendy, telling investigators he thought she was in her early 20s. She was only 14. King County's forensic anthropologist says it's vital to replace a number with a name.
The unidentified situation in this country is often referred to as our silent mass disaster, because we have so many unidentifieds. And at any given time, the number is usually quoted at around 40,000 in this country.
The family of Wendy Stevens has asked for privacy, grateful to have answers, but still grieving.
These weren't just Bones 10, for example. These are people that...
Charlie Murphy, 100%. Both of them were necrophiliacs. I think Bundy was able to allow law enforcement to see that this guy probably appeared to be normal, but behind the scenes was just a pure 100% monster. And if it wasn't for Ted Bundy, they may not have seen that, apparently.
needed their names back.
In a statement to me, Dr. Kathy Taylor said this victim held a special place for her because she was so young. In her words, she died before she ever got a chance to really live. We have now given her back her name, Wendy. They are still working, by the way, to identify 2 other sets of remains. Meantime, Gary Ridgway will spend the rest of his life in prison.
This will tell you that they have not stopped trying to solve every aspect of the Green River Killer's crimes, and this is evidence of it. Ridgway confessed to 49 murders over the course of several years back in 2003 and has been rotting away in a cell ever since. But detectives have still been trying to place names with a couple of his unidentified victims, including a young woman whose remains were found in southeast King County in January of 1986. Forensic evidence suggests she was in her mid to late teens when Ridgway killed her, and she may have been from out of state. This now is how they believe the woman looked after they used, in easy-to-understand terms, DNA analysis from a company called Parabon Labs to isolate her genetic makeup in terms of hair color, eye color, and the like, and with the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that was able to put this composite sketch together.
Creating the structure of what we think.
Real quick, I just want to respond to Kimmy's comment here. Ridgway was not bright enough and Bundy was fairly intelligent, so IQ doesn't really matter when it comes to them. That brought up something I was thinking about earlier on. I was wondering if it's just the fact that they are psychopaths, that things that you would assume would give other people away, just doesn't happen to them. They're not giving off weird vibes. They're not giving off nervous energy. They're not, maybe it's just the fact that they are psychopaths that we overlook them. I don't know if you remember World War Z, but some people were immune to these zombies and they were running right around them. So I'm wondering if something similar is happening to investigators or people who are looking into these crimes, where somehow their subconscious just kind of goes around these psychopaths because they're not putting off any of those vibes, because normally you can probably sit down a killer, who's been struggling with it, it's been eating away at them, and you get them in the interrogation room and boom, they crack. But a psychopath, they're just like, no, it's like just another day.
I think this child's face could be, and that's using a 3D modeling software based on a CT scan of the skeletal remains That 3D modeling software allows us to put digital clay on top of the skull in order to create a facial approximation as to what we think she could have looked like. The goal of that is to obviously get the face out to as many people in the public through whatever means we can.
Yeah, the analysis also concludes that the victim is likely from the eastern United
Indeed,
States
Teresa.
or Canada, and the sheriff's office said today that
it took another psychopath to catch him, to help catch him. You're right.
Likely take a tip from somewhere else across the country in order to give the victim, finally, all these years later, a name. That's the story. Live in Seattle tonight, I'm Chris.
I think ruse number 1, 2, 3 will work with this one. Explain that process to me.
Well, one of them was, a woman would get in the car.
She's already in
She's
the
in the car. Let's say she's always in the car. We're driving down the road, and she wants to see my ID. So I whipped out my ID, and with my ID would be I'd put my finger over my driver's license to hide my name. But on the opposite side was
Whole truth. Good
pictures.
to see you.
And a picture of my son. And then she'd see my son, and they would know I was probably a normal person.
But
Did you hear what he said? He said, I kept a picture of my son in my wallet, so if they saw it, they would think I was a normal person. So he knows he's not normal. He's even attempting to cry there, because he's talking about his son. He's like, well, I know that I miss my son, and I know that most people right here would cry, and it seems like he even tried to. Let's watch this again.
saying, I think ruse number 1, 2, 3 will work with this woman. Explain that process to me.
Well, one of them was, a woman would get in the car.
She's already in the car?
She's in the car. Let's say she's always in the car. We're driving down the road, and she wants to see my ID.
Okay, ladies, I want you guys to specifically pay attention to this. Don't get in the car. You see, everything starts from that moment in time.
So I whipped out my ID, and with my ID would be I'd put my finger over my driver's license to hide my name. But on the opposite side was pictures. And a picture of my son. And then she'd see my son, and they would know I was probably a normal person.
But you...
Crazy.
To go to the Green River.
Anything
As
but
the
normal.
water gently flowed down the river. Her hand was waving.
Yeah, pure
in the
evil,
current.
Vanessa. Pure.
Sort of like, here I am. They were dead bodies. He was
Bye,
the most
Rhonda.
prolific serial killer in the history of the United States. 60, 70, possibly 80 victims. It was like looking into the eyes of pure evil.
Yeah, never go to
Anything
a
is
second
possible with
location.
this guy.
Ever.
This case took 20 years.
So
You just
many
fight like
missing
hell
young
and scream
girls.
right
The
there.
DNA profile of the Green River Killer.
They don't stop. Serial killers don't stop.
So that was a clip from Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. I think I have a couple random stuff like that. Just kind of sitting in there. See what else we got. I think that's actually from CNN. That's where I got that.
He was transferred because he was a good boy and he was a model prisoner. It just slapped me in the face.
A slap in the face to the former King County sheriff who helped put the Green River Killer behind bars. And now Dave Reichert wants some answers from the state. Gary Ridgway admitted to killing 49 women in Washington, but he was quietly whisked away from a Walla Walla prison in a private plane. Ridgway is now serving his life sentence at a federal prison in Colorado.
There, he is no longer being held under maximum security. Congressman Reichert had some very strong words today for the government officials who made this decision, and he spoke with Cairo 7's Essex Porter this afternoon. Essex?
Steve, Congressman Reichert told me he got no warning of the move. He didn't know it had happened until it had been reported by the Seattle Times a few days ago. Prosecutors were able to connect Ridgway to 49 murders beginning in 1982. He traded information about the location of the bodies in exchange for being spared the death penalty. Reichert says families accepted that bargain in the belief that Ridgway would do hard time in Washington state. Ridgway has reportedly been a model prisoner here, but state officials were worried about his mental health and safety, so they secretly sought to move him. In Colorado, the Times says Ridgway may be eligible for a job and other privileges.
Another disrespectful government decision that is more concerned about the criminal than the victims' families. And that, to me, is what hurts the most. Give him his medication, make sure he gets to eat, and make sure he gets all the necessities to sustain life, but he doesn't need to have a social life playing shuffleboard in another prison outside the state of Washington.
Reichert believes corrections officials could have kept Ridgway's travel plans secret without keeping victims' families totally in the dark. Congressman Reichert says he will file a public disclosure request with the Department of Corrections so he can see their reasoning for himself. And at the very least, he wants Ridgway to be placed in isolation while he is in federal prison in Colorado.
One by one, to the names of victims he had forgotten or never even knew.
For the death of Gary Ruiz.
Guilty.
What drove Gary Leon Ridgway to kill so many women? According to court documents, Gary Ridgway called killing a career. Choking is what I did, and I was pretty good at it, he said. The sight of prostitutes was like a candy dish, kind of like a hunt.
I picked prostitutes because I thought I could kill as many of them as I wanted without getting caught. Is that true?
Yes.
Ridgway says he hated prostitutes, but also chose them because they were easy prey. In 1982, he began murdering them virtually at will. After his arrest, years later, Ridgway easily led Green River Task Force detectives to his dumping grounds, to the clusters of bodies he called a beautiful person that was my property, my possession. In the final analysis, prosecutors say Gary Ridgway killed because he wanted to. He killed because he could.
I picked her up, planning to kill her. After killing her, I placed her body in the Green River. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
In January of this year, the Green River Task Force was doubled in size, making it the largest police investigation in Northwest history. Today, 41 detectives work out of this Burien office, but some are never here, working undercover operations on the streets. Others are experts in outdoor crime scenes, literally combing inch by inch through the killer's dumping grounds. Captain Frank Adamson leads the task force detectives.
One victim was too many, and certainly 26 is far too many. They want to catch him.
Is the task force doing enough?
Well, I think the task force is doing an awful lot. I think it's doing everything that it can do.
Known as the Green River Killer.
That's right. He's the man who terrorized the Northwest back in the 1980s. He murdered more than 48 women, and that's more than any other serial killer in U.S. history. The Eye at 5's Liz Roca reports.
July 1982. A woman's body is found in the Green River. Her name, Wendy Caulfield. No one knew it then, but she was the first victim of a brutal serial killer. 4 more women's bodies turned up in August. They'd been strangled. Most of them worked the streets around the SeaTac Strip. By the late 80s, more than 50 women were either dead or missing, but the identity of their killer remained a mystery. Until 2001, when DNA tied a mild-mannered truck painter named Gary Ridgway to 3 Green River victims.
Pulled her back as far as I could, and
A year and a half later, Ridgway gave police a detailed confession. He even led investigators to the undiscovered graves of some of his victims.
guilty.
In 2003, Ridgway pleaded guilty to 48 murders. Although it looked like the final chapter, one story remained untold. Ridgway's wife, Judith, who looked so stunned, so surprised the day of his arrest. After 6 years, she's out of hiding and ready to tell her story.
What do you remember?
I was
So crazy.
in shock that day when I heard someone driving up in the driveway, and I couldn't believe it.
Maybe the first one I choked like this.
When she found out about the secret
Pulled her back as far as I could, and
her husband had been keeping, shock and shame drove her into hiding. She never...
All right, sorry to pause it there, but I wanted to answer this comment by Don Spain. What's up, Don? Said John Douglas, an FBI profiler, completely misprofiled Ridgway, and he was free to kill for 2 more decades. The thing is, like, how do you profile somebody like that? I'm starting to think that they may not have been able to get a profile without Ted Bundy. You know what I mean? I mean, how do you preview into that psyche or that mind unless you're actually living through those eyeballs, you know? And I'm assuming that the whole movie of Silence of the Lambs was based on Ted Bundy's interaction with Clarice Starling and them searching for Gary Ridgway. He must have been the Buffalo Bill in that scenario. And I can't remember the detective's name, but of course that was Clarice. And then you had Hannibal Lecter, who was obviously supposed to be playing Ted Bundy. So I guess he doesn't have to have some kind of high IQ to be able to elude police. I mean, he just seems to have to be extremely cold-blooded. Passing lie detector tests? Yeah, that's crazy.
answered the phone. She changed her name, her hair color, and appearance. She wanted to look nothing like the suburban housewife married to Gary Ridgway, the mild-mannered truck painter, who turned out to be the notorious Green River Killer. A discovery both devastating.
I still can't believe it, but it has happened.
And humiliating for Judith Ridgway, the serial killer's ex-wife.
Oh, it was like a brick wall dropped in front of me, and didn't know what to do. Everything stopped.
And it feels that way even today.
Here's a good comment by Sensei Wackadoodle. I think serial killers are a different league from the average killer. The way police look at murder victims possibly needs to change. Zodiac, Ridgway, BTK, Ted Bundy, Ed Kemper, the Night Stalker. Well, the only thing they ever really learned about the psychology or the psychopathy of these killers is from other serial killers. Everything that's in the FBI handbook comes from these killers. So there's nothing, they're trying to be proactive. Like right now, I think they have, they did implement something in 2012, I believe. If you begin abusing animals, like it can be considered a felony, and then you go into a database where you have to give DNA, and that you're considered basically committing a gateway crime, and you have a real high probability of committing these similar types of crimes against humans. So they're taking action like that, but it kind of reminds me of the Minority Report. So it's a little bit scary, but I mean, it should have already been a felony anyway. And it's common sense that you think that that would lead to people hurting, humans if they're hurting animals. So I'm glad they're doing stuff like that. But truthfully, that's as proactive as I've ever seen them get. Everything else they've learned from stuff that's already happened, these killers who are willing to come forward and kind of give you a peek into to a psycho's mind, really.
Is if time is standing still because Judith can still hear the sound of police cars coming down the driveway to deliver the news.
It's a day I'll probably never forget.
A day when life as she knew it began to unravel. How could the man she adored for 16 years be a killer?
He was always happy. His smile never changed. For me.
Gary had always been a loving husband.
He made me feel like a newlywed every day.
They met in 1985, married in 88. She moved into Gary's modest Rambler in SeaTac, a home where, unbeknownst to her, scores of young women had been brutally murdered. From there, they moved to their dream home in Auburn. Judith describes their life as loving and content. They were surrounded by treasured pets and took many weekend trips that hold fond memories even today.
What I miss the most is the love that I had in our life. And he was the best. To me, anyway.
That's why it was easy for Gary to convince her.
What?
His
That's
arrest
so
was just a
strange. It's so strange. I don't know what to think about that.
Case of mistaken identity.
He was reassuring me that everything would be okay, and it was painful.
Painful in part because the pieces just didn't fit. Gary had never raised a hand to her, never even raised his voice. And if he was away from home, he always had a logical explanation. He was working overtime at Kenworth or attending a union meeting.
You never saw anything suspicious?
No.
Still, detectives went through the...
Heather Brown brings up a good point. When they were speaking with Ted, or when he was able to come forward and kind of talked about his issues and what he thinks was responsible for him becoming a murderer, because he really lived a normal life. His parents didn't abuse him. There was nothing there to say, hey, this guy might potentially become a serial killer. So he said it was basically an insatiable appetite for beginning with porn and, just escalated on and on. The porn needed to become violent. Then no longer was porn acceptable. It needed to become real, voyeurism and all kinds of weird stuff like that. So yeah, that's a good point.
Ridgway's cozy home with a fine-tooth comb. This never-before-seen video shows the aftermath of a necessary but intrusive search that sent Judith reeling. Investigators seized her jewelry and some of her clothing, convinced they could be trophies Gary took from his victims. Still, in Judith's...
Did you guys catch that? So he was taking items from his victims and presenting them as gifts to his wife.
Gary was innocent.
Man.
I was still in just such denial.
And then a series of discoveries
Yeah,
and
Kemper is
photographs
he's
shattered
another
Judith's trust.
complete
Suddenly, all the
psychopath.
pieces that didn't
For
fit
sure.
began to fall into place.
Judith found a stash of condoms in the couple's garage. Detectives found more stuffed in the framework of Gary's pickup truck. And it gets worse. They tore Judith's car apart. The crime lab found traces of semen. Investigators told Judith Gary had probably used her car to pick up some of his victims.
Then I felt
He took her car. And so you're driving this car, and the whole time you're watching the news, and there's stories about the Green River Killer. That kind of, doesn't that remind you of Richard Allen? Like, he's sitting there in the living room with this whole family, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened in Delphi. He's like, yeah, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And the whole time, the killer's been driving your car, been sleeping in your bed. Like, how crazy is that?
The anger that he had sex with someone else, that he hurt me, that he betrayed me. He said he did not do anything with those women. But then when I found the condoms and stuff, then I realized that he did.
But for Judith, there would be one more staggering surprise. Gary had killed 4 of his 48 victims during the years he was.
Oh, wow. Brick with Eyes says, yeah, so he can relive the experience in plain sight with her wearing their jewelry. I didn't even think about that part. I just thought him having them in the house was enough, to satisfy that, to keep them close. But no, he needs it on his. Wow. That's really creepy.
With her.
Oh, I'd say, why, you son of a bitch, why did you do this to me? Why did you put me through all this?
And why, Judith thought, did he kill all those women?
Do you think about the women and their families?
Oh, yes. My heart goes out to all of the families and the victims that he hurt, and I can't even imagine what they've been through.
And what about him, the man she believed was her Prince Charming? Judith refuses to visit Gary in prison.
50 active serial killers right now running around the United States. Imagine the ones they have no clue about.
Still conflicted.
Do you love him?
Now, I love the man I knew, and I hate the man that took him away.
For the Eye at 5, I'm Liz Roca in Seattle.
Wow.
I wasn't going to let her go. Just loved killing women. When I started killing, I just kept on killing them.
So this is a story that has haunted not just Western Washington, but the entire country for decades. The Green River Killer, one of the most prolific serial killers in history, and now he is the focus of a new documentary on Tubi called Sins of the Father, The Green River Killer. So joining us now to talk about this, executive producer of the show, Robert Twilley. Robert, good morning.
Good morning.
So Robert, talk a little bit about what drew you to tell this story.
Well, I mean, there are many draws to this sort of story. It's a horrific story, of course, but he was at one time the most prolific serial killer in history. He had over 49 victims. It may have been as high as 90. That's still in debate, but it was his dual life. He was this vicious killer, but he was also a family man. He was married 3 times. He had a son. He had this outwardly devout religious life as well, and so he really masked this horrible
Thank you, Sensei.
side of himself and was able to function for decades.
So, I mean, I do want to ask you, and everyone here who lives in this area understands the connection to this area, but that also means I think it hits really close to home for a lot of people. So how are you expecting people to react to this? I mean, let's be honest. I think the public has a thirst for true crime. However, some people feel like coverage like this gives guys like the Green River Killer a platform. How are you expecting that reaction to be?
I understand, and I think as filmmakers, there has to be a sensitivity to the victims and to the locals who live the,
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
story. I do see this as ultimately the success of law enforcement, the dedication that they brought to solving this crime. There were many near misses in terms of apprehending Ridgway. And it was really the emergence of some DNA science that allowed him to be caught. And so I do understand the sensitivities of this subject matter, and our producers are careful to balance that with the information that we're relaying. But we do believe that there's value in this kind of storytelling, because it does show the lengths that law enforcement and communities have to go to bring these kind of killers to justice.
Yeah, yeah. Again, the title of the documentary is "Sins of the Father," and I know you mentioned that Ridgway had this
Israel,
double life.
he's
Really, I mean, how
crazy as
did
hell
something
too.
like that impact, say, his son?
We didn't speak directly with Matt, but we were very fortunate to have his interviews, taped interviews with law enforcement, and we did speak with co-workers of his father who knew Matthew. I mean, I don't think there was ever a suspicion that the Green River Killer was his father. He grew up, of course, in the Seattle area and saw the head.
That's interesting, Bees. Mary O'Toole, FBI profiler, was the one interviewing Gary. Yeah, she asked some really good questions. Well, apparently she claimed Delphi Killer was probably a serial killer and sadist. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, why not? How else? I mean, how else has he been hiding? I mean, we don't know. Maybe he got lazy. Maybe he got lazy in Delphi. I don't know. Maybe he did Delphi and then realized he had to go somewhere further. I mean, I don't know. But I am beginning to think he is a psychopath. I mean, how else do you go and just linger about, go about your business on the 13th, communicating with conservation officers and all that kind of stuff? I mean, normal people, first of all, normal people don't commit murder. But then you have another type of killer. You have like a killer who they become burdened with grief and they confess. You have, well, actually, you have all kinds of different killers. You got passionate killers like, oh my God, I can't believe I killed my lover. I blacked out. But then you got this guy who seems to have planned the murder, committed the murder, and almost seems unaffected by it. To me, that's what a psychopath is. But that's just me.
Headlines that was rocking the community. His engagement from his father, our reporting shows, was he lived with his mother primarily, but there was this connection that they had. They saw each other.
Yep,
on weekends.
necrophilia. Him and Ted Bundy.
Sort of typical father-son activities. One of the truly disturbing discoveries for me as a producer was that Ridgway, Gary, admitted to at least committing one of his murders while his son was present. The son didn't witness the murders, but he was on site. And so it's just a horrific thing.
Yeah, that's very strange. So my understanding of the story is he was with his son. His son was a passenger in a vehicle. They pulled over and they parked. And Gary Ridgway left the vehicle, went, I think, a block or two away, committed a murder, hid the body, left, and I think came back and moved it or something like that. But the entire time was with his son.
To consider, but now I say.
So I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Who do you think else could have been? Why was Richard Allen on the trails? You think he was having a family event and slipped away? Is that a possibility?
That there was this sort of normal family side to Ridgway, and I suspect that Matthew's experience was more of a traditional father-son relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So if you want to check out the documentary, it is called Sins of the Father, The Green River Killer. It's that new documentary on Tubi that we mentioned. Robert?
Take the girls different places.
This is actually a clip of the documentary that they're referring to, and the link is in the description. This is just a short clip because we're going to start talking about this guy. Maybe I can read this little article here. The name of this article is 10 Terrifying Facts from the Green River Killer Who Murdered at Least 49 Women. And there's not a lot that you can find on this guy. They actually get his name wrong in here. They call him Melvin Wayne, unless that's his middle name. But their version of Ron Logan's name was actually, what the heck was his name? Oh, yes, Melvin Foster was his name. Sorry. Maybe Wayne is his middle name. Here, I'm going to read this from top to bottom. The first arrest police made was on August 20th, 1982, but while their suspect was in custody, the real Green River Killer abducted 16-year-old Terry Milligan, a sex worker from the Sea-Tap Strip. The first suspect was then let go, and in September, police picked up their second suspect, Charles Clinton Clark, who had been accused of raping 2 prostitutes. He confessed to the rapes, but while behind bars, 19-year-old Mary Meehan disappeared from the strip and was proof enough that Clark wasn't the Green River Killer, even though he was a rapist. Finally, in October that same year, a taxi driver named Melvin, a Sea-Tac Strip regular, was arrested. He failed his polygraph test. And yet again, while the police suspect was in custody, 3 more women were killed. Shonda Summers, who was 17, Denise Bush, who was 23, and Shirley Sherrill, who was 18. So then police let him go. And in this small clip, they kind of, the dude looks really suspicious. So I thought we would kind of spend some time on how people can look guilty of something just because of their personality and kind of how they come off. So it's almost like we need to start looking at people that don't come off that way, as being kind of suspicious. So let's take a look.
I've been in a lot of these areas. I know these areas. So things like for them are matching up.
Here, did you kill all those women or what?
No, but I wish I did. I wish I did know who did.
Did you hear what he said right there? So that's him right there. That's Melvin. Melvin Foster. And did you hear what he accidentally said? He's like, I wish I did. Like, he didn't mean to say that. If that happened with Delphi, people are like, oh my God. It's kind of like that, what was his name? Eric? Where he almost said victims or whatever. But it really doesn't mean anything.
No, but I wish I did.
I wish I did. Did you kill those girls? I wish I did. What he meant to say is, I wish I know who did.
I did know who did.
And what's crazy about this, he goes on to sell one of his vehicles for like $1,100, and a undercover cop comes and buys the vehicle, and because he's now their number one suspect, right? And they find all this weird stuff. They find pictures of some of the victims, like with him, intimate photos. They find like underwear and all kinds of stuff shoved all over the place. But that's because he was a taxi driver and he knew them, and he was probably in relationships with some of them. And he failed the polygraph test. So the killer passed, and the guy who looks super guilty failed. Does that remind you guys of anybody? Wow. All right. And here's the image of him when he was in the Navy. And apparently he went to Vietnam as well. Not trying to argue? What do you mean? Usually when somebody says not trying to argue, that means they're trying to argue. And I didn't know we were arguing. What's going on? Your rough definition of the word psychopath. I think it's somebody, I mean, there's people who are psychopaths who don't go around killing people, I'm sure. You know, I'm not trying to offend anybody. But to me, a psychopath, I'm really thinking more like a cold-blooded psychopathic killer types. You know, somebody who could commit multiple murders and their heartbeat not even like change, you know. They can leave the dinner table and then come back and sit back down and had just gone and committed a murder or something, you know, something strange like that. Somebody who is just cold-blooded. They don't see the human side of anything. Kind of robotic, I guess. Bossy, there was a lot of weird stuff going on at the beginning. There was talk, like people knew that this guy had come forward and they were trying to explain to everybody, hey, look, the guy on the bridge came forward. I know him. But nobody came out and said his name. And law enforcement, you know, they never even hinted that they weren't interested in the guy on the bridge. But there was always this talk. You know, you'd hear it from locals, you would see it in Facebook groups, and you know, people would just, they wouldn't stop talking about it. He's cleared. He's cleared. I promise you, he's cleared. And come to find out, the guy had from the beginning, you know, came in and announced that he was there. So bizarre. All right. So I have a couple more pieces here I wanted to share before we get out of here that I thought were pretty interesting. First, well, actually, Gary Ridgway, I guess he typed up a letter and sent it to law enforcement trying to mislead them, trying to make it seem as if like a salesman or something like that had done the crimes. I couldn't find a good copy of that for some reason, so I was a little annoyed because it looked really weird. But I also have this, which is, I mean, how do you not find this guy? Look at this shit. It's terrifying, honestly. Okay, so let's zoom in down here. State of Washington, border of Oregon, and this is the area where all his victims were found. So one thing I want you to take notice of is right here it states Ridgway's residence, pre-1987. So before he started the murders, now every one of these little purple squares is a crime scene, is where they recovered a body. Look at this. I mean, it's completely surrounding his home. And then also, if you notice right here, 6 bodies were found just in this small area alone. You could walk to his house. Look at that. So crazy. But he just seemed like a normal guy. He wasn't picking up prostitutes, I don't think, normally. I think he was just picking them up to kill them. So I guess he's not like a regular, you know, where other prostitutes can be like, oh no, the Gary Ridgway guy. He's always out here. Well, Vanessa, who was he with? I mean, why was he on the trails? I mean, was he there hiking? Was he there with a group of people, and he wandered off. I mean, I don't know. What the hell was he doing there? Like, what was his excuse? And what are other people accepting as an excuse? And it's one thing to accept the fact that he went and, spoke to law enforcement and they didn't pressure him. But I mean, it's another thing. Did he have blood on him? Was he acting strange? Was he giving any hints that he had possibly just committed a murder? You have to be a complete psychopath to go home to your family, sit down with the dinner, and talk about those missing kids. So according to this, 49 victims can be found here on this map. I mean, these are people. He's just killing one after the other. Kind of gives you chills. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at his letter. Now, he wrote a letter, and I guess he read it to the court. But I thought it was kind of strange. So I'm going to share that with you guys here. Let me catch up on the chat real quick. Well, Sensei, I think somebody, that's more opportunity to be seen. It's like, well, I don't know, but I saw Richard Allen coming and, he's been at the trails quite often. Did you check with him? Yeah, it seems premeditated, right? I don't know. And I don't know, but I have this weird feeling that maybe Richard Allen may have even had an inappropriate relationship with one of the girls. And maybe they knew he was going to be at, there, and they were like going to confront him in front of everybody, maybe. And he's like, nope. I'll meet you over there. I'll come and talk to you in a little bit. Just thinking out loud. That's pretty much what it is. Oh, sorry. All right, let's take a look here. So the author of this letter here is Gary Ridgway. Apparently he read this to the court, and he says, "I'm sorry for killing all those young ladies." Like, what the fuck? Just the first sentence. Zero emotion, right? I'm sorry for killing all those young ladies. Like, how do you even... I have tried hard to remember as much as I could to help the detectives find and recover. Look at his F's. They're so weird. I got like hooks on them. And recovered the ladies. I'm sorry for the scare I put into the community. I put in the community. I want to thank the police, prosecutors, and my attorneys, and all others that had the patience to work with me and help me remember all the terrible things I did and to be able to talk about them. What? What does that even mean? It's like all he cares about is pleasing the court. You know, you guys wanted me to remember, and I tried my best. I know how horrible my acts were. I have tried for a long time to get these things out of my mind. I have tried for a long time to keep from killing any more ladies. And he calls them ladies. Ladies. Like all I did was kill some ladies. Like, I don't know. That's kind of strange to me. Maybe it's nothing. I'm sorry that I've put my wife, my son, my brothers, and my family through this hell. I hope that they can find a way to forgive me. I am very sorry for the ladies that were not found. May they rest in peace. What? They need a better place than what I gave them. I'm sorry. There's that F. This one's even like, it's like one of the last ones, and look, they're even more hooked. I want to get like a professional's opinion on this. Because like everything's all spaced out strange too. For killing these young ladies, they had their whole life ahead of them. I am sorry I caused so much pain to so many families. Signed, Gary L. Ridgway. Very strange. And then I also found a timeline, and we'll end it with this, and then we'll hang out in the chat for a few. So let's go through this. Said F, no, I ain't taking no polygraph. Yes, I mean it obviously it doesn't make any sense. They got their prime suspect fails a polygraph, and they got the guy who actually did the shit. He's passing the polygraph. Sheesh. I don't know enough about that case, Goat. To me, that sounds more like a robbery gone wrong. Maybe somebody seems like might have even been their first time. Maybe a secret. But it seems like a robbery. You know, somebody they knew. He couldn't leave. Maybe somebody who wasn't in their right state of mind even. I wouldn't doubt it if drugs weren't related. Somebody desperate for money, you know. Amateur using a knife, you know. And I don't think a serial killer is going to pick 4 people, including men, honestly. But that's just me, and I don't really know what I'm talking about. All right, so let's take a close look here. February 18th, 1949, Gary Ridgway was born. July 7th, 1982, Amina Ageshif disappears. She is believed to be Ridgway's first victim. We covered that, played some local media coverage of that. So that's very similar of the movie Silence of the Lambs, right? You know, they found out that I think it was like the third victim or the seventh victim that was found was actually the first victim. And they knew that he was coveting this victim and that he made a lot of his mistakes with the first victim. And they talk about that in the movie, and it just so happens to be true in the case of Gary Ridgway. Fledgling killing, I guess what they call it. The bodies of Opal Mills, Cynthia Hines, and Marcia Chapman are discovered. The hunt for a serial killer begins August 15th of 1982. May 8th, 1983. The body of Carol Ann Christensen is found. DNA traces on her body will eventually tie Ridgway to her killing. 1987. Ridgway takes a polygraph test and passes. Says later he passed it by simply relaxing. So he may have the lowest IQ in the world, but this guy is not dumb. You know, sometimes simple is the smartest thing you could ever possibly do in any situation. And Ridgway seems to have been getting away with murder just by just take it easy, man. That's so crazy to me. "1990, the Green River Task Force is disbanded." I wonder if that's when it officially went cold. Detective Dave Reichart is informed that Ridgway's DNA matches that found on the bodies of the Green River Killer. Now, it was Dave Reichart is basically the Clarice Starling. That's the name I was looking for earlier. So he's the Clarice Starling of this whole thing here. So the Green River Task Force is disbanded. Basically, it goes cold. Then you have somebody fresh to come in and take a new look and have a new perspective. And what happens? The case is solved. I wonder if that's what's happening in Delphi. 2001, Ridgway is arrested as he's leaving his workplace. 2003, November 5th, Ridgway avoids the death penalty by confessing to the murder of 48 women. December 18th, 2003, Ridgway is sentenced to 48 life sentences with no possibility of parole. So I hope that helps understand a little bit into the mind of these psychopath family men. Yeah, either he thought that or he convinced himself. One or the other. Either way, yeah, for sure. He did not think that prostitutes were good people. I don't even know if he looked at them as human or not. I'm not sure. Yeah, they're not normal people. And something about that shed, I wonder if we're going to hear more about this shed, Richard Allen's shed, his little he shed. Yeah, they're thinking at least up to 100. And I'm wondering if those are just the victims that they were unable to find. Like, we can't charge you because we can't find the bodies, you know? I wonder if that plays any kind of part. Yep. We don't really remember all the victims of the hurricanes, but we definitely remember the name of the hurricane. What's up, Sandy? Yeah, guys, we're going to be getting out of here. So I want to thank everybody who participated in the live chat and stuck it out through the beginning. If you're part of the replay crew, leave a message and we'll make sure we get back to you. You guys take it easy.